I sat alone in a cozy cafe, about to add sugar to my coffee, on a miserable day with snow, sleet, and howling wind. Despite the unpleasant weather outside, I felt comfortable within. The door kept opening and closing, allowing cold air to enter, but it didn't bother me. My thoughts were elsewhere as I sipped my coffee until Sturtevant entered. A struggling artist with remarkable talent, Sturtevant had unfortunately fallen into a pattern of failure, now facing financial difficulties and poverty. As I looked up at Sturtevant, I felt a slight astonishment despite his unchanged attire. The same worn coat and brown hat. The surprise stemmed not from what he wore, but from an unfamiliar quality about him. As he brushed snow off his hat with a familiar motion, there was an unusual nuance in his gesture that caught my attention. I couldn't recall when or why I had extended an invitation to Sturtevant, but instinctively I signaled for him to take a seat across from me. He obliged and soon sat down. When I asked what he'd like to order, he casually perused the menu before placing his leisurely selection, and then suggested we share a pot of coffee for two. I stared at him in a mix of astonishment and acceptance, knowing that as the one who initiated this turn of events, I was ready to bear the consequences, despite being aware that I lacked the necessary funds to cover the costs. As I gazed upon him, I couldn't help but notice the unusual sparkle in his typically dull eyes and the radiant, optimistic flush on his cheek, which further left me in awe. I asked if he had inherited some wealth, to which he responded, though not inheriting from an uncle, he did discover something valuable: his mascot. I guessed it might be a dog breed, but he revealed it was actually Currier. Sturtevant paused, noticing my surprise, saying it wasn't unexpected, since even he was astonished by the change within himself. He claimed to have undergone a significant transformation in just a few hours, becoming an entirely new and different person. I've observed you turning a blind eye as I entered penniless on numerous occasions. I understood your reasons. It wasn't that you didn't want to pay for my meal, but rather because you lacked the funds. Is this the check? Please take it. I thank you. Unfortunately, I don't have any money with me tonight, so consider this my treat instead. He summoned the waiter and, with a characteristic flair, signed his name on both check's reverses before dismissing him. The man was quiet for a moment, observing my surprised expression as he smiled. He then asked, "Do you know anyone with more talent than me?" I responded that I didn't. When he inquired if there was something in my profession I couldn't do if I tried, I again said no. Sturtevant went on to say that after 7 or 8 years of being a reporter, I hadn't seen him receive any recognition until tonight. He pointed out that just now he wasn't refused anything, and that tomorrow marked the start of his new career, with a bank account within a month's time. According to him, this was because he had discovered the secret of success. He went on, his words unwavering as I remained silent. With this tale, my destiny is sealed. After reading it, I am convinced of my success. It holds the power to bring prosperity not just to me, but to anyone who reads it. The transformative impact is undeniable. You'll discover its potential only after experiencing it for yourself. Once familiar with a particular narrative, even the most daunting tasks can seem achievable, much like understanding simple apses clarifies complex concepts. The moment you comprehend its essence, success becomes inevitable. Just this morning, I was a despondent and directionless individual, discarded like trash in the city's waste. By nightfall, I wouldn't trade places with anyone, not even a millionaire. This might seem absurd, but it's genuine. The millionaire has squandered their passion, whereas mine is bursting forth, ready to be harnessed. I was astonished, my comment hinting that perhaps intoxication from something like absinthe might have explained his extraordinary behavior or words. Would you share the tale with me? I'd be delighted to listen. I'm more than happy to share this with everyone. It's astonishing that a piece of writing has survived for so long without anyone appreciating its value until now. I was in a desperate state just this morning. My stomach was empty, my funds were depleted, and I had no place to get a meal. The prospect of taking my own life or slowly starving seemed the only options after being rejected by 3 publications and having all my submitted work returned. But then I stumbled upon that story, and the impact was incredible. You can hardly comprehend the sudden transformation it brought about. In an instant, everything changed for me, and here we are today. But what is the story, Sturtevant? Hold on, let me complete my thought. I submitted those outdated illustrations to various publishing houses, and each and every one of them promptly accepted them without hesitation. Can the narrative have a positive impact on others in the same way that it has resonated with you? I queried further, wondering if it might also prove helpful or insightful to someone like myself. I'd be happy to assist you. If you're willing to share the information, I'm all ears. However, if you think it's more effective for me to access the material directly, that would work too. The choice is yours. Despite the interruption, the speaker decides to recount the story. To begin, they explain it like this. However, just then, the waiter stepped in to announce that Sturtevant had a phone call and excused himself as he got up from the table to attend to it. Approximately 5 minutes elapsed before I witnessed him hastily exit into the harsh sleet and wind, vanishing from sight. Among the regular patrons at that coffee shop, it was unprecedented for Sturtevant to be summoned out by telephone call. This unusual occurrence itself served as significant evidence of a shift in his life situation. One evening, while out, I ran into an old friend from college, who had since become a journalist for an evening newspaper. This encounter took place roughly a month after my significant conversation with Sturtevant, which at that point was already slipping from people's memories. The man greeted the narrator warmly, asking how his day was going and if he was still stuck in a rut. The narrator responded wryly, mentioning that he might soon have a chance to get out more, but sounded pessimistic. Noticing the narrator seemed more optimistic, he asked him to share what was going well. A series of fortunate events has been unfolding in my life, and it's truly astonishing to reflect on the entire situation. You're familiar with Sturtevant, right? Everything's because of him. I was in a tough spot, contemplating a bleak future and searching for you to borrow money for my rent, when I ran into Sturtevant. He shared an incredible story that completely turned my life around. It took just 24 hours for me to get back on track, and since then I've had little to no trouble. Avery's matter-of-fact comment brought back a conversation I had with Sturtevant at a cafe during a stormy night, almost a month ago. That story must be truly astonishing, I said in surprise. Sturtevant did mention it to me once, but we haven't met since. Do you know where he is now? Avery responded, saying that the individual in question had spent time in Cuba creating war sketches, earning $200 per week. He's now back. Interestingly, every person who has heard this tale has experienced positive outcomes as a result. I'll paraphrase it for you. I've got friends in Cosgrove and Phillips, people you're unfamiliar with. One's a real estate agent, and the other is a broker's clerk. Sturtevant shared his story with them, and they encountered similar outcomes as I did. They aren't alone in this experience either. As for knowing the story, I'm asked if I'm aware of it. The person then asks me to attempt its impact on themselves. With great enthusiasm, I'd be delighted to have this message prominently displayed at New York's elevated stations. It would undoubtedly bring positive effects, and is as straightforward as 1, 2, 3, similar to a peaceful rural life. Pauses. Excuse me for a moment. I need to go speak with Danforth over there. I'll return shortly, friend. To be candid, my stomach was grumbling. At that precise instant, only a nickel occupied my pocket. I only had enough money for a one-way ticket to the city, but it wasn't enough to buy food as well. A noisy late-night delivery or service vehicle, night owl wagon, would often pass by my regular standing spot, which was usually in the neighborhood. I approached the street food vendor at midnight as he was getting ready to leave his wagon. I asked to help, admitting I was broke again and needed him to trust me once more. I requested some ham and eggs, which he initially hesitated over before re-entering the wagon with me. Inside, he introduced Mr. Bryan, a new owner of the wagon, as someone who would look after me just like he did, since he had recently sold out his business to him. He also asked if Mr. Sturtevant was an acquaintance, and I nodded in confirmation. I was speechless, even if I had wanted to say something. The former insomniac then went on, sharing that a remarkable tale was shared with him just a month prior, when an unexpected visitor entered his establishment one night, and it remains the most enchanting narrative he's ever heard. I've recently acquired a location at 510 West 8th Street, where I'm establishing a permanent dining establishment between 22nd and 24th Street. I look forward to your visit. He left before I could intervene, shutting the sliding door firmly behind him. I ate my meal in silence, determined to hear the tale before bedtime. As time passed, I started viewing it as almost magical, believing its power to shape destinies was contagious and could benefit me too. The story's aura seemed to surround me, taking hold of my thoughts as I walked home, my mind occupied with the single nickel in my pocket and the prospect of a downtown trip tomorrow. As I strolled, I felt an unseen presence lurking behind me, as if fate were walking parallel, never quite catching up, yet unmistakably present. I was convinced that the story had taken possession of me. Upon arriving at Union Square, I consulted my contacts and looked up the residence of Sturtevant in my digital or physical directory. It wasn't documented at the initial location. Later, I recalled a cafe in University Place and thought he might be there despite it being late. To my surprise, he was indeed present, seated in a secluded area surrounded by acquaintances. At the same moment, our eyes met and he beckoned me to join them. However, an opportunity for conversation was foiled as there were already 6 people at the table, with me positioned farthest from Sturtevant. Still, I kept my focus on him, waiting patiently, determined that when he got up to leave, I would accompany him out. As I sat down, a reverent quiet settled over the group, as if they were in the presence of something extraordinary. A collective silence fell, with every individual's gaze intensely focused on Sturtevant, as if awaiting a revelation from him. The reason became clear as he shared his tale. Unfortunately, I missed the beginning of it, since I arrived at the cafe a little too late. As I sat down, a doctor was seated to my right and a lawyer to my left. Confronting me was someone I knew casually, a writer. Across from us were creatives, including painters and journalists. The doctor regretted Mr. Currier's late arrival, mentioning that Sturtevant had just shared an astonishing tale. He asked Sturtevant to retell the story for Currier's benefit, as it seemed Currier had missed the enchanting narrative despite being its first audience member. All of which took place at this very cafe and table where they were seated. "Do you recall that memorable evening, Currier? Didn't I get interrupted by a phone call of some sort around that time? I recall now that my narrative was interrupted just when I began sharing a particular story. Afterward, I told it to several acquaintances, and it seemed to invigorate them, much like its impact on me initially. It's astonishing yet true that a simple tale could have such widespread diverse effects on people from various professions. This story has served as an unwavering elixir, akin to a universal cough medicine, effective in treating everything from minor colds to severe illnesses. Take Parsons, for instance. He was a broker struggling with poor market performance and the threat of professional collapse. When I met him at his lowest point, I shared the tale with him, and it had an identical reviving effect on him as it did on me and every other individual who has heard it, to my knowledge. I believe we can all concur that the impact on readers doesn't stem from the story itself, but rather how it's presented in written form. The author has achieved an intangible, psychologically affecting outcome that defies description. The reader becomes captivated, undergoing a transformative experience that not only refreshes their mind, but also uplifts their character, leaving them revitalized and improved. Doctor, could you shed light on the scientifically backed impact stories have? They are essentially a potent concoction crafted from language, aren't they? This prompted an extensive exploration of various theoretical perspectives among the group. Occasionally, allusions were made to the tale, enough to pique my curiosity as the sole listener unfamiliar with the story. After standing up from my chair, I walked around the table and firmly grasped Sturtevant's arm to lead him away from our group. If you have any compassion for an old friend, tormented by a nagging story that seems destined never to be told to me, then please share it with me now, I demanded harshly. Sturtevant was taken aback, his expression a mix of shock and wildness. "All right," he agreed. "The others will excuse me for a few minutes, I think." He gestured for me to sit down and said, "I'll tell you the story. It all started when I found an old scrapbook in Ann Street for 3 cents, which contained this peculiar tale with no clues about its original publication or author. As I began reading it casually, I became engrossed, eventually rereading it multiple times to commit it to memory. The story had a profound impact on me, as if I had encountered a powerful personality that left an indelible mark. The narrative appears to possess a universal, relatable aspect that resonates with each individual reader on a deeply personal level. After reflecting on the matter several times, I decided to take a walk, unable to remain indoors. As I walked miles without noticing the passage of time, my mood had transformed from one of despondency to buoyancy, a stark contrast from earlier. It was then that we met, as you recall. Just then, a messenger interrupted us, delivering a telegram to Sturtevant from his superior, requesting immediate attendance at the office. The chief had already been delayed by an hour and couldn't be further postponed. Sturtevant reluctantly rose and bid farewell, shaking hands. "I'll tell you what I'll do, my friend. I won't be away for much longer than a couple of hours at most. Take my key and stay in my room, where you'll find a leather-bound scrapbook from the window desk. Presumably it was created by the same person who wrote the magical tale. Don't leave my room until I come back." I easily located the book, which had a homemade appearance. Its cover was made of rawhide bound with leather straps, as Sturtevant mentioned. The pages were an eclectic mix of yellow paper, vellum, and handmade parchment. I found the story, printed on the last material, to be quaint and unusual. It seemed that the printer worked closely with the author while setting the text, which blended 17th and 18th century writing styles with distinctive use of italics and capitalization. When reproducing this story, we've removed its unique typography, but kept everything else intact. The magic story, author unknown. As I've gained wisdom from life's experiences, I believe it's essential to share my insights with future generations before my time runs out. My expressions may not be polished or literary, but that's irrelevant. What matters is the knowledge itself. Having used tools much heavier than a pen in my life, my writing might be rough due to age and experience. However, I'm confident in conveying facts and valuable lessons. The manner of sharing isn't as important as the substance, so long as it's helpful and understandable. As one ages, memories from youth often remain sharper than recent events. The way an idea is expressed is secondary to its usefulness and impact on the listener or reader. I've pondered long on how to convey this recipe for achievement that I found, and it seems sensible to share it as is, with the story of my life and the instructions for combining the ingredients and adding flavor, serving as a natural guide. Perhaps future generations will come to appreciate these words even after I'm gone. My father, a sailor by trade, abandoned his career at sea and established a plantation in Virginia, where I was born in 1642. Over a century ago. It would have been wiser for him to follow the advice of my mother and stick to his original profession, but he chose otherwise, exchanging his command of a ship for the land. This marks the beginning of an important lesson. Don't overlook the value in what you currently have at your disposal, even if it means sacrificing potential future gains. In fact, the security and benefits of present circumstances, no matter how small they may seem, like having one piece of silver, often outweigh vague promises for a better tomorrow. Focus on maximizing what's already within reach rather than chasing uncertain prospects. By the time I was 10, my mother's spirit left this world, and 2 years later, my father followed her. As their only child, I was left on my own, but friends took pity on me and provided a temporary home for 5 months. Unfortunately, my father's estate didn't provide any support to me. However, as time passed and wisdom grew, I came to believe that the friend who had given me shelter might have cheated my father, and by extension, me. I won't recount the years, from 12.5 to 23, as they're unrelated to this story. Instead, I'll mention what happened later. After accumulating 16 guineas, including 10 saved from my hard work, I boarded a ship to Boston. Initially, I worked as a cooper, and then switched to being a ship's carpenter once the vessel was docked. However, the sea wasn't something that appealed to me. Fortune can surprise even those initially at its mercy. This was my case as I went from being an employee to owning the same yard just 4 years later. However, one must remember that fortune is a stubborn mistress and cannot be won over with kindness alone. Thus begins the second crucial lesson. Fortune is fleeting and can be kept only through determination. Treat her kindly, but if you do, she might abandon you for someone more resolute. I believe this about fortune as I do about many women. They respond better to firmness than indulgence. Original quote attributed to Geoffrey Chaucer. Around this period, despair, a harbinger of shattered spirits and weakened resolve, befell me. A devastating fire swept through my properties, leaving destruction in its wake and piling up debts that I couldn't afford to pay off. Working alongside acquaintances to find help for a fresh start, I found their empathy had also been scorched by the same flames of adversity. As time passed, not only did I lose everything, but I was left heavily in debt, ultimately leading to my imprisonment due to those debts. My setbacks might have been overcome, but this latest humiliation crushed my morale to the point of utter despair. I spent over a year imprisoned. Upon release, I was no longer the same optimistic, joyful individual, content with life and trusting the world and its inhabitants, as I had been before imprisonment. Life offers numerous routes, with a significant majority leading to a downward trajectory. The decline can be sudden or gradual, yet all eventually converge on a common endpoint: disappointment. This marks the beginning of the third crucial life lesson. One's greatest failure can only occur at the moment of death. As long as a person lives, they haven't truly failed. They have the opportunity to correct their mistakes, regroup, and climb back up using the same path, or find an alternative route that better suits them. This latter approach might take more time, but can be more adaptable to one's current circumstances. After leaving prison, I was broke, possessing only my worn-out clothes and a useless walking stick. As a skilled laborer, I quickly found a good-paying job. However, after experiencing worldly success, discontentment took hold of me, causing me to become irritable and withdrawn. To lift my spirits and forget my past losses, I started spending evenings at the local tavern, where I'd socialize and engage in light-hearted banter with friends. Not necessarily because I was a heavy drinker, but because it allowed me to laugh, sing, and have fun. This experience taught me another valuable lesson. Note. There's an implied fourth lesson which is not elaborated upon here. Surround yourself with hard-working individuals, as the lazy can drain your motivation and vitality. When prompted, I enjoyed recounting the story of my misfortunes and complaining about those who didn't assist me when needed, as I felt they had wronged me. Additionally, I took satisfaction in secretly taking extra time from my employer each day, which was less honorable than simply stealing it outright. As time went on, my situation worsened until one day, not only was I jobless, but also lacking in reputation, making it impossible to secure employment anywhere else in Boston. It was then that I felt like a complete failure. My circumstances were akin to someone sliding down a steep mountain, picking up speed as they lose control. Alternatively, this state can be likened to being an Ishmaelite, a term describing a person whose own hand is against everyone else and believes others' hands are also against them. And so begins the fifth lesson. Both the Ishmaelite and the leper are considered outcasts by society, despite their differences. The Ishmaelite's social status can potentially change through acceptance or forgiveness, as it is a product of human perception. On the other hand, the physical affliction of the leper, caused by the presence of poison in their blood, is a more concrete and inherent condition that cannot be altered by societal acceptance alone. I won't go into detail about how my energy levels have declined over time. It's best not to dwell on unfortunate events, a lesson worth remembering, for too long. At a point of utter destitution, I was left with no means to buy even basic necessities. My situation was dire, except for occasional moments when I managed to earn a few coins or a shilling. Despite efforts, I couldn't secure steady work and suffered physically from emaciation. What troubled me more, however, was the toll on my mental well-being. It was as if I were spiritually dying. In my mind's eye, I felt utterly rejected by society, having hit rock bottom. This is where the sixth and final lesson of the story begins, a lesson that cannot be condensed into a single sentence or paragraph, but must unfold throughout the rest of the narrative. I vividly recall waking up one night in a makeshift bed of shavings at the back of a cooper shop where I once worked. The cold, dark atmosphere was a stark contrast to the warm and light-filled dream I had just experienced. While others might attribute the profound impact of this vision on me to my mind being affected, I'm writing this to potentially inspire similar transformations in others. That fateful night's dream revealed to me that I possessed two distinct entities within myself, and it was my higher self that ultimately provided the long-sought guidance that my acquaintances could not offer. This internal duality has been described as a double existence. Despite that specific term not accurately conveying my intended sense, it's futile to discuss doubles as each part lacks distinct identity. However, I won't delve into abstract theories, as philosophical ideas are merely ornamental coverings for empty constructs. The actual dream wasn't what changed me. It was the impact it had and the power it wielded over me that led to my liberation. In essence, I nurtured an alternate sense of self. After braving a harsh blizzard, I gazed into a window and caught sight of this other personification. He glowed with robust good health. As I stood at his doorstep, I noticed the large fire crackling in the hearth and the imposing figure of the man who answered my timid knock. His robust physicality and confident air left an indelible mark on me, and he invited me in with a hint of amused disdain. As I warmed myself by the fire, he remained silent, leaving me to feel unwelcome and self-conscious about our stark contrast. Eventually, I departed into the storm, weighed down by the shame that had been awakened within me. But then something extraordinary happened. When I awoke again, I found I was not alone. A presence, invisible to others but palpable to me, accompanied me. It was only later that I discovered this presence, which seemed so real to me, remained intangible to everyone else. This marked the beginning of an unusual chapter in my life story. The entity before me shared my physical appearance, but possessed a distinct quality. Its facial features were similar, yet more rounded and full. Its eyes shone with determination and enthusiasm. The entire presence exuded confidence and resolve, whereas I felt anxious and fearful. As the entity moved away, I followed, never losing sight of it, except when it vanished behind closed doors that intimidated me. During those moments, I waited for its return with a mix of apprehension and reverence, marveling at the presence's boldness in venturing into places my own feet avoided. I felt as though I was intentionally guided to locations and individuals that made me nervous, places where I had previously conducted business and people with whom I had financial dealings. Throughout the day, I searched for this enigmatic presence. As evening arrived, it vanished beyond the entrance of a well-known inn, renowned for its warm hospitality and excellent cuisine. Later, I sought out the storeroom's pyramid of barrels and shavings. That night the better self did not appear in my dreams again. However, upon waking, I sensed its presence nearby, characterized by a serene and slightly mocking smile that neither conveyed pity nor consolation. The disdain emanating from this enigmatic figure caused me considerable distress. The second day was much like the first, a repetition of the same pattern, leaving me waiting outside while the presence visited places I longed to be in, but lacked the courage to go. Fear, it seemed, had taken control of my body and rendered my soul insignificant. Despite numerous attempts, I found myself unable to speak clearly when addressing the presence. My words were mere stutters, unintelligible. Days blended together until I stopped counting, only to realize that being in the presence's company was having a subtle impact on me. One night, as I awoke among the casks and sensed the presence nearby, I found the courage to speak, albeit with a tremble in my voice. As I dared to inquire, "Who are you?" I was surprised by the resonance of my own voice, which caused me to sit up straight. Noticing a hint of amusement on my companion's face, I thought maybe his smile wasn't entirely mocking as he replied. The response was, "I am that I am. You are the shadow of your former self, a potential manifestation waiting to be rekindled. Why hesitate? I am the essence of who you once were, now cast out to other pursuits. I'm the human form made in God's image, once sharing your physical body, though not harmoniously due to our contrasting nature. Our cohabitation was uneasy, as we rarely vied for full control. Initially, you were frail and malleable, but selfishness and self-absorption eventually forced me out. In every human born, there is a plus and minus entity. Whichever one the flesh favors becomes dominant, often leading to the other's temporary or permanent departure. I am your plus entity. You are the minus. As the omnipotent owner of all things, you possess nothing. The body we once shared is mine, but it's unclean and unworthy of my presence. Purify it, and I will reoccupy it. I posed the inquiry to the entity. What is your intention in pursuing me, and what drives you to do so? You've actively sought out my involvement, not the other way around. While it's possible for you to survive without me temporarily, your current trajectory is towards decline and ultimately demise. As you near the end, you're considering whether it would be wise to purify your mind and invite me back in. I'll only return if you clear out my space within your consciousness, specifically your intellect and will. Otherwise, I won't reoccupy them again. My mental strength wavers and my determination falters. Is it possible for you to restore my cognitive vigor and revitalize my willpower? The majesty of the presence loomed large as it issued a stern command, its towering presence causing me to shrink in humble submission, my posture a testament to my profound reverence of this powerful being. To a man of great confidence, all obstacles seem surmountable. The world is his domain, and he claims it as his own. Unfazed by doubts or fears, he has no limits. He asserts his authority without asking permission, and others yield to his demands. His commands are treated as decrees, and resistance retreats in the face of his approach. With an unwavering stride, he traverses a landscape unmarred by obstacles, where only success awaits. After another nap, I found myself in a new world. The sun was out, birds chirped above me, and I felt revitalized, my body now strong and full of energy. As I looked at the pyramid of casks, I couldn't believe it had been my home for so long. I realized that last night was the first time I'd slept anywhere else. As the events of the previous night replayed in my mind, I sought out a sense of presence, though it remained invisible. Instead, I found a wretched figure cowering in the corner. twisted and distorted in appearance, unsteady on its feet as it awkwardly approached me with pleading intent. My laughter was merciless in response. It's possible that, at this moment, I recognize this being as the minus entity, while the plus entity resided within me, even if I didn't fully comprehend the distinction yet. Urgency drove my actions. I had no time for contemplation. There was much to accomplish, and it was peculiar that I hadn't considered this sooner. Yesterday was behind me, and today had just begun. A new chapter in which I found myself suddenly